Welcome into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Check out fullpresscoverage.com for more great podcasts, including this one and other articles, features, all sorts of great stuff on fullpresscoverage.com. You can also check out this podcast and my awesome Celtics post-game recaps on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/JetStriar. That's JETSTRIAR. And leave a comment, subscribe, like. Remember to engage with us because, hey, your ideas might make it on the show. We can't come up with everything. That's asking way too much of us. Though Sap typically likes to come up with a rundown for what we're going to do for a show. And I think at this point, he's starting to find it comical to try to get me to talk about the Celtics as much as possible because I try to avoid that at all costs just because it's just been a miserable season. But I think you found a good compromise, Sap, and today we can talk about Celtics adjacent things.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Absolutely. And look, I would assume that most of our followers are either Celtics or Lakers fans. And look, they're still the two biggest franchises in the NBA. Although I think the Celtics brand is not as big as the Lakers, and the Celtics right now look like an Eastern Conference middling team, and the Lakers, if they get LeBron and Anthony Davis back in time, look like still the favorites to win the Western Conference. But yeah, people like to talk about the Celtics and Lakers. You look at national shows, they still come up quite a bit. The Lakers are still the most talked about team, along with, say, the Brooklyn Nets, and the Celtics come up a lot as well. And look, the beauty of a podcast is, you're reaching local people, but it is kind of a national show. If someone in Southern California wants to listen to us, they want to hear us talk about the Lakers. If someone in Chicago listens to us, they want to hear us talk about the Bulls. And the beauty of basketball, it is a national sport, right? I mean, I'm a Laker fan because of LeBron James.
Right. It's not a regional thing like hockey.
It's not a regional
thing.
No, hockey and baseball are regional sports. The NBA is followed by NBA fans who follow the entire sport. It's like football, right? You don't have to be a Patriots fan if you're in New England, and you watch the entire league.
Yeah, that's why those two leagues get the biggest national TV deals because people are intrigued to see what other teams do, when they're on national television, to see what, Zion's going to do on a certain night, or LeBron, even if you're not a Lakers fan. It's the intrigue of the star players. And yeah, I do agree. The Lakers are the biggest brand in basketball and have been for a while, in part because of their success, in part because of where they're located. LA happens to be one of the biggest cities on the planet. And the Celtics, even though Boston's not nearly the size of LA, remain one of the most popular teams because of their franchise history. So regardless of where they are right now in comparison to each other, yeah, they'll remain two of the most popular teams in the sport. And until no one cares about basketball anymore, which I don't see happening anytime soon, I think that's those two teams will always be talked about, even when they're not particularly good. As we saw with the Lakers just a few years ago, they weren't particularly good, and yet everybody was talking about them because who will they pick here? Who's going to be the next big Lakers star? So that's how it goes. And I understand that I do have to do my obligation of talking about the Celtics even when they're not good, Sap. I can't just talk about them when they're doing well. I can't just be that front runner, Jermaine Wiggins, who comes in and does the show when the Patriots do well and then says I'm sick when the Patriots lose a game. I'm not going to do that. So we can talk about the Celtics.
Don't be Brian Scalabrine, who, everything is balloons, ice cream, chocolate cake, everything's beautiful. And then when they lose, well, it might have been the official's fault that they lost the game. Be more like Perk, sit there in your casket or wherever he's sitting in, or a chariot.
Throne.
And big throne for Big Perk. And don't be afraid to criticize the team, although they have won 2 in a row, albeit against the Houston Rockets and a totally depleted Charlotte Hornets team. But you know what? A win is a win is a win. And here's an interesting thing to think about, Jet. There is a real possibility that the Celtics end up higher seeded than the Lakers. I mean, that could happen.
Yeah, strangely enough.
With
a worse record.
With a worse record, by far a worse record, because the West is so deep. The Lakers, I'm just hoping they finish in the top 6 so they can avoid that 7 through 10 play-in scenario.
Right.
The Celtics can be the 4 seed in the East. They're not going to catch Brooklyn or Philly or Milwaukee, but they're in the running for the 4 seed with teams like the Knicks, Charlotte now is not.
Oh, after the
Gordon
top three in
Hayward.
the East, it's a complete cluster. You know what? It's everybody is in the race. It seems like. So yeah, it's a funny point that you raise. The Celtics absolutely could finish with a higher seed than the Lakers with a worse record. But as I've said before, Sap, seeding doesn't matter to the Lakers because LeBron and AD, and they have won a championship before, and LeBron's won a bunch of them. They can go out and beat teams on the road without much of an issue. The Celtics certainly can't. I mean, I want to say seeding matters to them. I still don't think it does because they'll lose in the first round, I think, regardless of their opponent. I can't imagine Miami slips below that 4-5 mark. And I think the Celtics would lose to Miami in the first round. If the highest the Celtics can go is 4, Sap, then they likely to me would play Miami at 5 and lose. If the highest they can go is 6, then they would definitely lose to one of those top 3 teams in the East. So I'm not backing off the Celtics losing in the first round. I don't see how they get out of it.
The seeding can matter for the Lakers, however. Again, stay out of that 7 through 10 scenario. But if the Lakers are the 6 seed and the Clippers are the 3 seed, now you got Lakers-Clippers first round. That's going to be a war. And then if the Lakers survive that, they'll probably play Phoenix in the second round, a team I think they match up with and can beat. But that could be a real first-round series, Lakers-Clippers, which I think in normal years, if everyone's healthy and playing up the capability, should be the Western Conference Final. We thought that was going to happen last year until Denver upset the Clippers. So not that seeding matters to the Lakers because they can go on the road. Again, crowds aren't really a factor. LeBron's won Game 7 on the road in his career, so I don't think he's going to be intimidated by that. But you don't want to play the Clippers in the first round because that's a team that I think matches up pretty well against the Lakers. It could be a first-round series, which would be one of the best first-round series in recent history, right? Lakers-Clippers, because we all think they're the 2 best teams.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you want to avoid the best teams as long as you can. I mean, that's how it goes. So the Lakers, by virtue of slipping that far, if they have to play the Clippers, they probably don't want to see them there. But I think they'll ultimately be fine. If they avoid the Clippers, great. If they have to play the Clippers, I think they'll look at it as, well, we had to play this team eventually anyways. So might as well get it over with while we have more energy as opposed to maybe we're tired at the end of the postseason. So it does seem like those teams will inevitably play. But like you said, Sap, it did seem like they'd inevitably play last year, and that didn't come true. Mm-hmm. So we'll see what happens out west. But as far as the Celtics sort of update, yes, they won 2 games in a row. I think actually more things are happening Celtics adjacent. Like we pointed out, they did play the depleted Charlotte Hornets. And people were looking forward to that game because it was going to be Gordon Hayward's first game back in Boston. The game before, he extremely ironically injures his foot against the Pacers and Miles Turner, who everybody wanted the Celtics to. I mean, literally, he stepped on Miles Turner's foot wrong. It wasn't that he was just playing Miles Turner. He injured himself on Miles Turner and hurts his foot. He's been pretty healthy this year, but now he's out for about 4 weeks with a foot injury. So again, the game right before he was going to play the Celtics. And that's on top of the LaMelo Ball injury that the Hornets already have. So they were not the same team that they've been which has been a surprisingly good team for the most of the season. And the Celtics were able to sort of have their way with them, as well as the very depleted Rockets. And the Hayward injury, I think, is a big deal to the Hornets, who are trying to stay alive in what you said is a very muddled bottom half of the Eastern Conference. And without their 2 best playmakers in Ball and Hayward, you certainly could see them falling out of the race.
Yeah, Terry Rozier is going to chuck up 25 shots a game, and no one's going to really say anything because he's their first, second, and third scoring option at this point with Hayward and Ball out. You look at Gordon Hayward, his last 4 years in Utah, he was top 30 in the NBA in minutes played. So far this year, before the injury in Charlotte, top 30 in minutes played in the NBA. His 3 years in Boston, we know what happened. His very first game, he blows out his ankle, misses that entire year, and then spent the next 2 years fighting other injuries and never really being Gordon Hayward. The 3 years here, he was like Samuel L. Jackson and Unbreakable. Like, he could not catch a break. And things were looking good in Charlotte, and he was averaging nearly 20 points per game, doing a good job facilitating. He's a really good player. He's a fringe all-star type player. He's been to 1 all-star game in his career. But now this happens. He may not come back till the postseason if Charlotte makes the postseason now, because as we talked about, that Eastern Conference is so muddled. you want to root for the guy. He seems like a decent enough guy. He's made a ton of money. I mean, after this contract, he's going to make over $200 million, which is great about being an NBA player, not a football player. Look, all the more power to NBA players that their contracts are guaranteed. But it's just unfortunate what happened with Gordon Hayward. And, now that whole team falls on the shoulders of Terry Rozier, who's having a nice season himself, but he's not capable of dragging a team into the playoffs all by himself.
Yeah, it is when you lose your two best playmakers, because that's what Hayward is more than anything. It's like he's like a point forward, so a really good playmaker. And then you just have guys who just huck up shots like Malik Monk, who didn't play the other day, but is on that team also, and Rozier. They're not really a team so much as just like a bunch of guys who sort of bomb away from three. And you can't really win that way. You need to have playmakers, and Ball looks like he's going to be an elite playmaker. And Hayward is at his position a very skilled passer and dribbler. So we'll have to see what happens with the Hornets. But 4 weeks without Hayward, going on top of that Ball injury, which looks like he might not return this season. If he does, it'll be right as the playoffs are about to start. They might really, really struggle. And the Celtics annihilated them the other night, and the Celtics aren't a particularly good team, so that might be a bad omen for the Hornets. A good Celtics perfunctory news or Celtics adjacent news is Isaiah Thomas back in the league. He is signing a 10-day contract with the New Orleans Pelicans. Everybody seems to love Isaiah Thomas around the NBA, not just Celtics fans, and there was just an outpouring of support for IT getting back in the league. He's worked hard to overcome this hip injury that's plagued him. His size is a factor. His age now is a factor. Do you think he can make any impact on the Pelicans?
I doubt it, only because small guards, and he's 5'9", barely, they don't tend to last as long as bigger guards. Chris Paul's kind of the exception. 5'11", 6-foot guard who's had a great career and continues to play at a very high level. Even at some point, Allen Iverson broke down. He was about 5 foot.
Chris Paul's kind of like stout, though.
He's stout, and he kind of plays more with his mind than he does with his body. I think Chris Paul, you almost get the feeling like at 45, he's going to show up in a pickup game and dominate against guys half his age.
Yeah, you don't see him crashing to the floor like Allen Iverson was constantly crashing to the floor. Isaiah Thomas, the seasons where he was on the Celtics, was getting picked up like every other play because he just crashed so hard to the basket.
I remember in the playoffs when he lost his tooth. I mean, that was like the ultimate kick in the you-know-what. And this only happened, I believe, like a week or two after his sister died in a car accident. I mean, the poor guy just had bad thing after bad thing after bad thing. He thought he was going to get a big contract from the Celtics. That never happened. Then they moved him in the Isaiah Thomas trade. I mean, in the Kyrie Irving trade. So, you want to root for this guy, but what does he really have left? New Orleans has been kind of a disappointment this year. They really have. And now Zion's going to miss a game or two with an injury. And, Lonzo Ball is back after missing some games, and Brandon Ingram's putting up good numbers. But the totality of that team is underachieved. I still pin it to Stan Van Gundy, who I think is the wrong fit for that team. We'll see what Isaiah has left. I mean, he could be a bench guy, maybe gives them 15 to 18 minutes off the bench, can score 8-9 points, give them a boost somewhat. He's also a player that really depends on the crowd. I'll never forget the playoff series 4 years ago against Washington. I was at TD Garden for game 2 of that series against Washington, which the Celtics ultimately won in 7. Home team won every game. He put up 50-plus in overtime. He was incredible. He outdueled John Wall and Bradley Beal, and he just fed off the crowd. The crowd loved him.
He finished third in MVP voting that year.
And he was second team All-NBA, and he was a 5'9" point guard. He scored almost 29 per game. But the injuries have sapped a lot of his skill set. And again, when you're 5'9" and you lose a little bit of that explosion.
He's not 5'9".
Tough.
I mean, I've met him before.
He's probably 5'7".
If that. He's 5'7's generous. That's probably what I'd say he is.
Yeah, because I met him at the Herald. He was in one day, and I'm 5'9". I was taller than him. So yeah, it's almost like Brad Marchand. I don't know what he's listed at with the Bruins, but I was in the locker room doing an interview with him a few years ago. We're like the same height. So obviously sometimes these heights are inflated, especially for the small point guards. They don't want to come across as 5'6" or 5'7". So we root for him, but I just don't know what he has left in the tank.
Yeah. I think if he can knock down his jumpers and his 3-pointers, that he can be a scorer off the bench. He certainly can't be a guy who's playing big minutes for you anymore and leading your team in scoring. I just don't think he's capable of doing that anymore. But I do think that he has a role in the NBA as a bench scorer if he's willing to accept that role. I think in the past in his career, he's had a hard time accepting anything other than being that lead scorer. And now, obviously, it's been a few years since that's been the case, and I'm sure that that's something that he's probably had to come to grips with. So I could see it working out. I think that he certainly has the respect of a lot of people around the NBA, a lot of players, and are rooting for him. So if New Orleans gives him a chance to play a role that he'll fit in, which is, like I said, some sort of bench scoring role, I think he could do well there. Listen, he's not going to help New Orleans' dreadful defense.
No,
he's not gonna. He's not going to be able to improve the skill of Zion or Brandon Ingram, but he could give them a lift off the bench. And I'd see this more as like a tryout for another team where he can carve out maybe more of a significant bench role than New Orleans. So we'll have to see. I'm happy that he's in the NBA because it just doesn't feel right that he's not old enough to be out of the league. And he's such a fun player to watch and such a likable guy that you root for him. He's gotten, like you said, a string of just bad luck between the injuries and his personal life, with his sister dying, and he was due for a big contract. If his contract had expired just a year before instead of a year after, he would have gotten a max pay raise. So yeah, I'm rooting for him. I hope he does well in New Orleans. I don't know if that's ultimately where he's going to end up, but I do hope that he shines in that role that they give him. He's just got to be willing to accept it, and they've got to put him in the right position.
Did we know a player of the last 10 years who enjoyed being a Celtic more than Isaiah Thomas?
No.
I don't think anyone. I mean, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. He
embraced it like nobody.
Like Kevin Garnett did when he came in. And actually, Garnett originally was kind of against coming here, right? Wanted to stay in Minnesota, and then he had to get talked into it by Paul Pierce and Ray Allen, and then they put this team together that won a championship.
He's the most popular Celtic since Garnett and Pierce left.
Since the big three, sure. Yeah, because he embraced being a Celtic. Sometimes you get the feeling like Jason Tatum, to a lesser degree, Jaylen Brown kind of look and go, what's the big deal being a Celtic? And again, they're so young. And obviously Jason Tatum grew up idolizing Kobe Bryant. So when these guys started watching basketball, the Celtics were, for the most part, irrelevant. And they can look up at those banners and they look and say, yeah, that's 50, 60 years ago. What do I care? Isaiah Thomas loved being here.
Yeah, he did, and the fans really responded to him and loved it. Yep. I mean, the fans of Boston respond to effort, and they like that sort of give and take they like the back and forth of the fans. He'd sort of egg the fans on. He'd get up on the table. He would get them to cheer louder. If you show effort in a Celtics uniform and dive on the court, the fans will love you. That's why they defend Marcus Smart so virulently, is because he's an effort guy. Those are the people that, for whatever reason, Boston seems to just grow very fond of those types of players.
Yeah, there's the history of the city, obviously with the 17 championships, and look, I think if you're the Celtics crowd, I wouldn't call a blue collar crowd. The Bruins crowd is more of a blue collar crowd. But still, you want to see max effort out there. I'm like the minimal effort guy. I like talent, as you know.
Yeah, I know you do. I think it's the history of the team sort of speaks to that with like Larry Bird and Dave Cowan. Some of their most famous plays are diving on the court. Bill Russell was obviously an effort guy. So it's sort of like in the DNA of the team. And you look at somebody like Isaiah Thomas, who, because of his size, had really no reason to be a good NBA player. I mean, it sort of defied logic. And I think a lot of the times you'd see him go drive to the basket with 7-footers. And so he's more than a foot shorter than these guys and finishing amongst them. The fans loved it. And he embraced the city embraced him. And you still see people on Celtics fans, any post he makes saying, come back to Boston, or Danny Ainge, bring him back, or, we love you, IT. Good luck wherever you're going. So he's got a great relationship with the city, and you do wish that some of these guys would embrace, like Tatum and Brown would embrace it like he embraced it, because I think that it gives the fans something more to root for, and it gives the player a little bit of extra motivation. And also I think it helps in free agency. I think that Al Horford and Gordon Hayward said as much when they signed here, that a big part of it was because Isaiah Thomas talked them into it. Now, Isaiah Thomas never even got the chance to play with Gordon Hayward, but he was pitching him, and he was the Celtics pitch man for coming to Boston, and you could feel the love he had for the city, and so it's a shame how it sort of ended. And I don't begrudge Danny Ainge for making the move, because I do feel like it was the right move to make. And I know Anthony Davis's dad said like they did him dirty, but that's just any team would make that move. I criticize Danny Ainge for a lot of things. I'm not going to criticize him for that trade and getting Kyrie Irving and trading away what was damaged goods in Isaiah Thomas. That's just the business. It's, you're trying to look at what's best for the team, not for the individual players. Unfortunately, that's the way it goes. So I wish him all the best. I don't think he'll ever be an all-star again or anything like that, but I do think he still has a place in the NBA. It's just a matter of finding the right spot and him accepting what that role would be.
Absolutely.
What I actually think was the most impactful basketball news over the weekend, Sap, was the announcing that Grant Hill is taking over USA Basketball. Really, he's taking over the entire operation and sort of as the overseer from Jerry Colangelo, who's overseen it since they've been good again, basically since like 04-ish, give or take.
Because 04 they didn't win the gold medal actually.
So that was
Spain did.
Yeah,
no, Argentina won in 04.
Since that Olympics, which was basically a national disgrace, people looked at it on. Jerry Colangelo took over, Coach K took over the coaching, and the team really has been pretty dominant since then. Colangelo's getting older. I think he's in his 80s now.
He's right around early 80s, yeah.
And also he's had issues. His son Brian had the issue with the burner accounts and running the Sixers, and his wife tweeting out things about Joel Embiid and stuff. So, and obviously he's his dad, so he went to his defense, and that didn't look particularly good. So it was time, between the age, the amount of time he's been running it, and the stuff with his son. The new person takes over, and that person is Grant Hill, who played on the Dream Team. Played on a gold medal winning team. I don't think he played on the Dream Team, did he?
No. He was still in college. The only collegian in '92, the only collegian was Christian Laettner, and Grant Hill was only finishing his sophomore year at Duke. So he
played
wasn't
on
part
the
of
'96 Olympic gold medal team.
The one that won in Atlanta, yes.
Yeah, with Shaq and Glenn Robinson. I actually have a poster of that team. Because that's when I started getting really into basketball. So I love that team. David Robinson was on that team too. So Grant Hill, I think, is a great choice. Universally respected, really, really bright guy. I love his commentary. I think when he does the basketball color stuff, he does a great job.
You think so? See, I don't think he says
I like it too. No, I really? Like it. I think because he's a really smart guy. Maybe it's because he can actually get the words out of his mouth as opposed to some people who can't.
He's extremely smart.
Cedric
but
Maxwell.
But he doesn't exactly push the envelope on there. He says a lot of obvious things. It's kind of an interesting mix with Jim Nance and Raftery, because Raftery is the old guy who makes fun of himself, and Grant Hill is, the Duke guy who came from affluence. I mean, his dad was an all-pro running back, Calvin Hill, who went to Yale. His mother went to Yale and was college roommates with Hillary Rodham at the time. Hillary Rodham Clinton, and she's a lawyer, so he comes from a family of affluence. Only child, went to Duke. Always one of my favorite players, because I think he could have been at some point the face of the NBA, because he had a fun game to watch, although he never really had a really great outside shot, but he had a fun game to watch. He could get to the basket, really good passer, defender.
I thought he was good at everything.
He was very good at everything, and good looking guy, like you said, accommodating with the media and the fans. But then he just had this incredible run of injuries, which almost felt like the injuries that Gordon Hayward's dealt with. Like he just never could get
snake bit
going. Then he finished up his career in Phoenix, where he was a bit player. He's in the Hall of Fame, and I think deservedly so, because it is the Basketball Hall of Fame. So you have to factor in his college career, which was superb at Duke, won 2 national championships. But his commentary is okay, I think. I mean, you like him. We can all have our own opinions. But this job here, now as the person running USA Basketball, in some ways, isn't it a really easy job? You just got to make sure you can get like 12 of the best players on the team together to go play in the Olympics. But isn't it also a job you can't possibly succeed at? Because if you don't win the gold medal, it's a failure, right? I mean, it's a difficult situation to be in.
It's a failure if you don't win the gold. I agree with you in that it does seem like an easy job. I definitely agree with you that it's a failure if you don't win it. Right. I do feel like, though, Colangelo coming in when he did, it really built up his reputation as a great, basketball mind more than what he did in Phoenix. Was that his reputation was really enhanced by how well Team USA played. I don't think it's as simple. The thing I disagree with you on is I don't think it's as simple as getting the 12 best players, because they basically did that in that Olympics that we talked about in 2004, and they had an all-star team and they didn't play particularly well. I think it's about finding the right players, and he's also going to have to find the next coach, because Popovich is only going to do it this Olympics. He's too old. He's not going to continue to do it afterwards. So he's got to find the next coach of the team, which is, I think coaching in the Olympics actually matters, because it's not so much strategy as a roster management, and in terms of you have what should be 12 of the best players in the world, and they're all used to being the best player on their team, and you have to get them to buy into you can only start 5 guys. You have to get them to buy into not being the starter, not playing the amount of minutes that you normally would play. So I do think the coach is important in finding that coach and finding the right mix of players. Like Tayshaun Prince was on a couple of those, I think on 2 of those gold medal winning teams. You wouldn't have thought of him as one of the 12 best NBA players, but they had him for a particular reason, which was to defend certain types of players in the Olympics. So I do think it takes a basketball mind to be able to pick this Olympic team for Team USA, and to not just say, all right, let's go. Let me have LeBron and Zion and, just take all these, the guys who are the front runners in the NBA, and say, just put the 12 best guys on the team. I think
you're not going to have Durant, Harden, Kyrie, LeBron. That's not going to work, because at that point, Jason Tatum, if he squeezes in, would be the 10th guy on the roster, and how's he going to deal with that?
You can't just have all shooters.
Minutes? No,
I think it's a mix of young players, veterans who are in their prime, veterans who are past their prime, and guys who are willing to play defense. Like Draymond Green, to me, no brainer, put him on the Olympic team. He's not one of the 12 best players, American players in the NBA, but I would 100% put him on the Olympic team.
Andre Iguodala always made the team as well. I don't think at any point in his career was he one of the 12 best players, but he was a good defender and a leader, right? So he was the kind of guy that if the top 2 players were feuding, he'd be the guy who could sit them down and say, all right, guys, we've got a goal to win a gold medal. Let's put these differences aside, because there's going to be a lot of drama with a lot of great players. And
Jason Kidd, I think, was on 2 teams too, well past his prime, and he was on as sort of like, you're probably going to play like 2 minutes total in the Olympics, but like people respect you. You're basically an extra coach. We want you in there practicing with them, So I think you got to find a mix of all those types of players. And I don't know that going forward, I don't know that LeBron's going to do it this year. I don't know that he wants to do it again. I don't know that Durant with his injuries is going to want. So you're not going to have the same pool necessarily that you have the past few Olympics. So I don't think it's as easy of a job necessarily as you're making it out to be, Sap, in that it's take the 12 best guys and roll.
No, but the perception is
internationally it's gotten better.
It has gotten better, but fortunately for the United States, you don't pool all the foreign players together. If you did that would be quite an interesting scenario. But the perception is if you don't win the gold medal, you've failed.
Absolutely.
Especially with the lay fan, right? I mean, we look a little bit more
failure.
Into it.
Silver is a massive failure for
absolutely.
American team.
Is Carmelo available again? He's already won 3 gold medals. He'll become the
he might be that last guy on the team.
But he enjoys it, right? And I don't think if Carmelo is really a leader, but, he can come out and get you a couple buckets in 6-8 minutes a game, and I'm sure he would cherish being there. Do you put Dame Lillard and Steph Curry? I don't think Curry's going to do it because he wasn't scheduled to be on the 2020 team, but he was coming off some injuries, and there were all sorts of things because they're not going to play till this summer.
And they do usually take a college guy too. They usually take one.
And they'll take a college guy. And
I think last time it was Frank Kaminsky.
Yeah, it's going to be a 4-year
like Tyler
guy
Zeller.
Too. Yeah, it'll be
one of those Gonzaga guys.
And it can't even be Luka Garza because I don't think he was born in the United States, was he? Could he play for another country? I'm not even sure.
Could, yeah, he could. He could
I would pick Jalen Suggs, but Suggs is already going to be in the NBA.
No, it's got to be a 4-year guy.
It's got to be a 4-year guy. That's why Leitner was the guy, not Shaq. Obviously, Shaq was the first pick in the draft. Leitner was third, but Leitner made it because he was a 4-year guy, and Duke had won 2 national championships with him. In '92, they literally did put together the best 11 players in the sport on one roster, with the exception of Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
Isaiah Thomas should have been on that roster, not John Stockton, but because Jordan hated Isaiah Thomas, it was John Stockton instead of Isaiah Thomas. It was like shooting fish in a barrel. I mean, Larry Bird probably wasn't one of the 12 best players in the league. At that point, he was, obviously banged up. He was nearly 35 years old, 36 years old, and he'd had a bad back, and he played limited in the Olympics. But you needed Larry Bird there because you wanted to see Bird, Magic, and Jordan play together, and it was just
It was also like an American representation, right? You're putting your most famous
Larry
players
Bird
in there.
Yeah, and Jordan obviously dominated, and although at times Barkley was the best player, and that's when Barkley then went to Phoenix and won an MVP that year because he was highly motivated. So, but that was a joke in '92. I mean, they were winning games by 40 points. The other team was, getting blown out and wanted to take pictures with the USA team because it was Michael Jordan.
That's not going to happen anymore either. No, the teams are too good. Even as great as the Americans will still have the biggest collection of talent, but every team they were playing teams without like guys who wouldn't even be playing Division III college basketball. They were playing like in 1992. They were playing like Senegal, who
Angola
had just put up their first like basketball court in 1992.
You and I could have been the backcourt in Angola if we had been from Angola.
Right. So it's different now, but I guess the only question then, Sap, is what do you think of Grant Hill in this position? Do you think it was a good hire, or do you think he'll do a good job?
He'll do a fine job, and he's the right guy because a lot of it is public relations as well. He's going to go on a media tour. And obviously part of this is going to be to recruit players, right? So I think he has a good relationship with NBA players, although a former player badmouthed him during a 30 for 30 10 years ago. Jalen Rose, who was at Michigan, played against Duke in the national championship game in 1992, which was Rose's freshman year, and Grant Hill was a sophomore, and essentially called him an Uncle Tom, because again, Grant Hill came from affluence. So a lot of
that was really unfair.
It was unfair.
It's like, Rose.
Are we supposed to trash on Grant Hill because he came from affluence and he's a good guy? I mean, and I love Jalen Rose, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that was the right message to send. So, but now Grant Hill has to go out and recruit players. Forget LeBron. LeBron's not going to do this again. He's got too much going on. I think Steph Curry probably isn't going to jump in. Maybe Dame Lillard becomes the best guy.
I don't think Curry has played on one, though. I think that might be the only thing is that he hasn't won a gold medal. I don't believe he has.
That's interesting.
I'm looking at the 2016 team, Sap. The roster was Jimmy Butler, Kevin Durant, DeAndre Jordan, Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry's a perfect Olympic player. Harrison Barnes, DeMar DeRozan, Kyrie, Klay Thompson, DeMarcus Cousins, Paul George, Draymond Green, Carmelo Anthony. So no Steph Curry on that. 2012, I'll look at that. I don't think he was on that team either, though.
He hadn't been Steph Curry yet.
Right. So I don't think he's played in the Olympics before.
Maybe he does that. Maybe he goes.
Yeah, he wasn't on the 2012 team either. I guess he could go, but I also have my doubts about him going. I don't. How much do you think it motivates these guys at this point to get a gold medal?
It's down the line of accomplishments. Accomplishments in the NBA, become an all-star. That's like the first thing they want to accomplish. The young players look at that as much as winning a championship, I think. Then as you get older, a championship becomes obviously goal number one. Getting a sneaker deal is right there with becoming an all-star, and they kind of go hand in hand. I think the Olympic gold medal is somewhere down below that because we win every Olympics except for in 2000. 2004,
you had that redeem team.
The redeem team, yeah. And
that team was
winning every
loaded,
year.
Like crazy loaded, too.
Yeah.
The team that they went, it was the same thing. They were looking for blood. They were killing everybody. Except
teams.
for Spain.
And Spain's always a factor. And now I think, some of the other European countries will be a factor as well. Luka's going to play for his country. Joker can play for his country. Obviously,
Australia is
play for Greece. Yeah, Australia could be an interesting fit because technically Kyrie could play for Australia. He was born in Australia, and you got Ben Simmons.
I feel like he'd be more willing to play for them than for Team USA, though he has played for Team USA in the past. So that's maybe I'm being unfair to Kyrie.
Well, if Durant goes, Kyrie will probably go, but I don't think Durant's going. He's had all these injuries. You think he's going to spend his
I don't think he'll go
in Japan?
He's won before.
He's won before. He's got the sneaker deal. He doesn't need to do it. That's why you fill in the gaps with players like you said, like Tayshaun Prince or Andre Iguodala.
The Japan thing is interesting, though, Sap. I'm glad you brought that up because it is a massive sort of just on the periphery of being tapped basketball market. So there might be some motivation from guys to sell sneakers and stuff by going to Japan and showcasing there. I don't know what the Olympics are going to look like in terms of fan attendance. There's going to be some. I don't know if it's going to be limited or what. Obviously, Team USA will be fully vaccinated by that time. We don't know about the other countries' teams. But I do feel like that might pique some players' interests that it's in Tokyo, and that's a huge market. I mean, Tokyo is one of the biggest cities on planet Earth. Japan loves sports. They're just starting to get into basketball. Hachimura is a very popular player in Japan. This is his second year in the NBA. If somebody could latch on there, I mean, really, when the Olympics were in Beijing, Team USA was the attraction. I mean, they were like rock stars, and Kobe Bryant, that grew Kobe Bryant's brand exponentially.
Yeah, and LeBron and Kobe Bryant were the two key players on that team, right? And I remember when that happened. Kobe's such a serious guy, and LeBron kind of got him out of his shell. Try to get more of a sense of humor out of Kobe, and they worked well together. I think that they fed off each other really well. I mean, this could be something again, but the season's going to end in July for two teams, right? I mean, the NBA Finals is going all the way to July. So if you're
Brooklyn
in the
and LA,
Finals, so let's say it's Brooklyn and LA. At that point, after having this long season, 72 game schedule condensed, and then this deep playoff run, LeBron, Anthony Davis, Kyrie, Harden, and Durant, they're not going to leave the NBA Finals and go to Japan to play in the Olympics.
I don't think so.
I can't see that happening. But
Grant Hill's going to have to. LeBron's won a gold.
He's all set with that stuff. I mean,
so look at those guys. Kyrie's won a gold. LeBron's won a gold. Harden, I think, was on that last team and won a gold. Durant has. Anthony Davis, I don't know if he has. So, LeBron's not going. I just don't see why he would.
No.
So they're going to have to. Grant Hill's going to have to make a new team here, Sap.
But Steph Curry could go because he hasn't gone, and I don't expect the Warriors to get
by
the first round. If that, so he may go. Zion would be like the star to go. That makes some sense.
Yeah, Dame Lillard might end up as the best player on the team.
And then you're going to see some Celtics, right? Because Tatum and Brown were both in line. Marcus Smart could be a fit as well. I mean, because he's that glue guy that plays defense allegedly.
He does.
Maybe. Fair. Yeah, I know. He really shut down Terry Rozier. He made sure that Terry Rozier didn't beat them.
He did.
Yeah. Congratulations. We'll clap. The only guy that could score for Charlotte was held down by Marcus Smart. But they like players like that, right? Because you can't have 12 scorers there.
Julius Randle
could be a
nice
good fit. Yeah.
You can't have 12 scores. You can't. No. They'll lose. That's what they tried to do when they lost in Australia. Was they had 12 scorers. They had Iverson and Pierce and McGrady, and it was a mess.
You had 11 scorers. Stockton was never really a scorer, and Pippen, believe it or not, was really not a scorer. He was such a well-rounded player. But the 92 team, you had just a wealth of scorers.